Good morning, day 289, coming to you from my little corner of my husband's grilling deck and watching the morning light come and resting. So I wanted to stay at home this morning because I feel like I needed the Bible with me because there's a lot at the end of chapter of the book of Corinthians. 2 Corinthians chapters 12 and 13. And there's always a lot. This is a dense book that if you sit with, it's just unbelievable. The complexity that's in this book and the different ways that it speaks. And that the Spirit, when you give it time, can kind of understand. Hey, good morning, good morning. We're in the second book of Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, and finishing it up with chapters 12 and 13. And I'm gonna start off with how Paul wraps it up. So I titled today, "Love Fills in the Gaps." We've just been talking a lot about love the last few days, which really, that's the message of this whole book. May the grace, Paul signs the letter and ends his letter with, "May the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you all." And in other translations, it uses the word communion. But those two words have a lot in common. And that is the commonality is common. It means you're coming together in a common goal. And that's what love does. When people accept the message of grace, so there's that barrier that keeps us separated and thinking that there are even gaps to begin with. The gaps are an illusion of our mind and our ego that tells us that we are separate from love. And then that can cause us to do things, sin, separation from God, that Paul talks about here. Quarreling, jealousy, anger, selfishness, slander, gossip, arrogance, disorderly behavior, like he goes through the list of what will happen when you believe that you are separate from love and that you have to find love, justify, earn, all of that with love. And then that causes our ego to do all kinds of wild things. But when we accept the message of grace, not only can we accept love and it starts to fill in the gaps that we thought were missing in ourselves, but we start to be able to look at other people with compassion, with fellowship, with communion, even when they might be acting a fool, like what Paul is saying. He's like, I love you. I don't want what you have. I want you. Just like a parent wants a child, just like a child can't offer anything to a parent. That is how I feel about you. Because I have the fullness of love and I know what that does for somebody, I want you to have that. And so I need to sacrifice and do what it takes so that you can see that embodied in me. And this is also where the very famous verse, whether you're a Christian or not, people know about the thorn in Paul's flesh and how in his weakness, God says, my grace is sufficient and you are made whole with me because of the thorn in the flesh. He doesn't take it away, even though Paul, and they don't tell us what it is, but Paul says that he begged for it to be taken away, and God lets him keep it for his own good because it keeps him humble. It keeps him connected. There's a gap that God gets to come in and fill up. And when we really start to, and I've been very honest as I'm coming into this understanding, that's all that it is. It's still up here. I've got to, as humans, we have to walk it out to really know it. And that's what Paul is literally doing. He's walking from town to town and sailing in ships and doing all of the things. He's living it so that he even grows in his understanding of it, and he can be it the way that Jesus was the way. And he is trying to emulate the way. And that is what we're all called to do. But a lot of us resist because we think there's things missing, and we're trying to fill in the gaps with our own version of love, and we are very vulnerable to counterfeit love that we get maybe even from other people. This is why it's easy to love people that are nice to you, but it's really hard when people are acting a fool, and we're called to love anyway. That doesn't mean be a doormat. It doesn't mean any of those things. But that's hard. There's nuances there that unless you've accepted the message of grace, then through Jesus, then the love of God comes in, and then you are able to fellowship. It's like an order. I think that was a very intentional, orderly thing, the way that he signed off there. And he even starts off chapter 12 a little bit like that. He's trying to fellowship with them and show them by example, all the apostles are, and trying to point out the difference between them, the genuine apostles who are living it out, versus the super apostles that he's having to come in and sort of defend himself against. And he's trying careful not to boast, but he has to boast a little bit. And, he's having to do things that are really uncomfortable for him for their sake, to get them to see and learn discernment as they are in a very vulnerable spot of being new believers. I would love for anybody to be reading this along with me and, talking about this, because this is the message that my spirit is getting, is that there's just a oneness. And when you sit still, allow the Spirit to be still and speak to you, then you feel a fellowship with everything, not just with other humans, but with creation itself, life itself. Like love literally fills in the gaps. Watching the birds play this morning and the sun come out and the trees, and I am a part of creation. I'm not separate from it as just an observer. That's the illusion. That's the veil that we have over us as humans, that we have to slowly, we don't have to do anything. That's free will. But if we choose to, once we see it, we can pull the veil off. And that's part of, Paul has referenced that here too. That's what the law does. That's what the earning relationship of rule keeping and tit for tat and scorekeeping that we do as humans is what separates us, what creates the gaps in the first place, that illusion. And love fills in those gaps within. And then as we start to fill it in within, we start to see the world in a whole different way. Paul talks about some of his visions, and he's like, they're so great, I can't even tell you. Like, I have been outside of myself, and only God knows if that's true, but I feel like I've been outside of myself and in paradise. And I can't even put into words. And if I tried to, I'd probably do more harm than good. But I have had these real experiences, and God knows that they're real. This is some deep stuff, y'all, that it's easy when we just read, as humans often do, and we don't sit. It doesn't become the living word within us. But allow it to sit with you and chew on it, meditate on it, and get the message of grace. It's overwhelming. That's what humans, we're like, that's too good to be true. It's just too good to be true. And yet it's the truest thing that there is, and that changes everything. It fills in all the gaps. And I'll never be the same again. I will never be the same again. Please, God, help me. I will. I think I'm in that vulnerable place. Well, that's actually not true. I could slip back in and put the veil back on and go to sleep, or fall for a counterfeit myself. So I'm going to put some guardrails up in place. And it's the behavior. We have to behave in a certain way. We have to live it out to really know it. And for it to come into our hearts. And so that's where and that's where humility. I mean, humility. And that, I have a feeling that is Paul's thorn, is he has a really hard time being humbled. He doesn't like it. And yet it is what God has called him to do, to be a living sacrifice, and to spread the message of love. And I have a feeling that this is part of what's hard for him. I don't know if I'm right, but I'm kind of guessing that he has that's hard for him. He does it, but it's not easy. It's a process, I would bet, every time. to be humble and put his ego aside. I think you get the feeling he really wants credit for converting people, and he lets it slip through and slide through. But I cannot. He's human, and so he has to continually accept that, go through that process with himself again. Grace, love, fellowship, and that fills in the gaps. You can't be in true communion and fellowship with people, experience it in a true way, if you haven't allowed grace and love. You can be, and that's what a lot of us, because we get together in groups, we can kind of fool ourselves. We think, when we come together, even in the church, with acts of communion and fellowship, that we think that we're feeling it, and some of us probably really are. But I know for me, I'm an individual in a group, saying that I'm fellowshipping and trying, but because I'm still standing in my own strength, and I hadn't opened my heart and my hands to the magnitude of what grace really was, I still saw myself as an individual in part of a group. So that's going to take some work, but I think I'm this hard head starting to get it. Hard heart. This is what when they continually reference the hard-heartedness throughout the Bible, I'm like, what does that mean? Why would God do that to some? Why would God allow that? And because it was me. It's us that does that. We do it to ourselves. We have that because we have that free will, and we're blocking it because we are dead to the law, and because of the law. And it's not necessarily just the law of the Bible and the Old Testament, but we all have laws that we put on ourselves, and rules that we put on other people, and expectations, and all of this. As long as you play within my rules and my laws, we can get along. But you step out of line, I'll let you know. And then we are no longer in communion and fellowship. And we hold ourselves and each other's captive and hostage to that. And that's the false counterfeit version of love that we experience as humans. And God has so much more for us, so much more. And it's hard. We can't even fathom it, so we hold on to our counterfeit version. And we hold on to those gaps and that separateness. All right, this is a lot. I feel like I'm going deep, and I hope y'all are tracking with me. And if you have not accepted the magnitude and the truth of grace, and really allowed yourself to be loved, and you have a lot of negative self-talk, you don't take care of yourself, and you even think that is loving because you're sacrificing and serving everywhere you go. A lot of people do this with very good intentions. I was one of them. I was exhausted, depleted, and thinking of myself as just very, very good. Because look at me, I'm just doing all these good things, and I'm so, so nice and so kind, and neglecting God's true gift, and even neglecting His holy temple, which is me. And so I was trying to, and I was giving a lot, but giving the false version of what I had, a false love, a counterfeit. No longer, no longer. All right. I love you guys. Rise and shine. 2 Corinthians chapters 12 and 13. Rise and shine together. Yes, together. We are not separate. All right. Bye.